a lot of times the district says to me in these mediations, oh, I wish this parent had an attorney, right? Because parents don't necessarily know what the law is or what they're actually entitled to or what, or what is actually possible under the law.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce to you Deborah Jacobson, who does IEP law, special education law. And you might be wondering, what is that? And so I'd love to ask you, Deborah, can you tell us what do you do?
Yeah, good question. When we say special education law, it means that I represent parents on behalf of their disabled children, predominantly against school districts, when a school district has violated a child's right to a free, appropriate public education, which basically means the school district has to provide support services and sometimes placement for children with disabilities based on their needs.
Okay, so that's in the books, right? Because I've heard of that. FAPE, right? Free
That's
and public education. So,
Free appropriate public education. Special
yes,
ed law is filled with acronyms. I call it alphabet soup. That is one of them.
gotcha. Okay, great. So, how does the government provide that? Like, what is the process? What is this IEP thing?
So, an IEP is an individualized education program, another acronym there. And the IEP process, in summary, involves a comprehensive assessment done by the school district. And that can be, generally speaking, the initial assessment is intellectual abilities, academic abilities, social emotional abilities. Kids get assessed for mental health needs, all kinds of stuff to identify what their needs might be. Once that assessment is done and their needs are assessed, they may be found eligible for special education, meaning they need specialized academic instruction to benefit from their education. Once that assessment identifies the needs, a plan is developed between the parents and the IEP team, which usually consists of a special ed teacher, maybe a district administrator, gen ed teachers, mental health providers, service providers, depending on the child's needs. And that individualized program contains goals that are developed based on the child's needs and present levels. So, a goal is designed to reflect what a child with that disability should be learning throughout the year. And then, based on those goals, the district may provide services such as academic support or speech and language services, occupational therapy. And based on the level of services a kid might need, they also might provide a different placement. Sometimes such intensive services are needed that the school district, the public school district, can't provide that intensive support. So a student might need an alternative placement called a non-public school, which would go into the IEP.
So fun fact, my husband actually was a special ed teacher at a non-public school.
Okay.
So he ran a lot of IEPs for
A lot of
sure.
IEPs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he loved working with the kiddos, but he hated the paperwork.
Yeah, the IEPs are hard. And some of these schools decide not to designate as an NPS, as a non-public school, because they want to serve the kids, but they don't want to do the IEP work. So they become private placements that parents can fund, opposed to non-public placements that school districts fund.
Gotcha. Although I assume that gets very expensive. Is that right?
It does, and that's, a reason why a lot of parents hire us,
There you
right?
go.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me about that. Like, what are some challenges that you've seen parents face in either establishing an IEP or enforcing it or meeting the goals? What do you see happen?
Yeah, I mean, in all of those areas that I described in the process, there can be disagreements between the parent and the school districts. Early on, it can be a disagreement about whether or not the child qualifies for an IEP. I always say there's a lot of professional gaslighting, which is when we usually get involved at that level of, school districts saying we don't, or school district personnel saying we don't see what you see. Your child's fine in school. This must be a home problem, right? That's one of the defenses I always say, the home problem defense. So early on, it can be something like that, like the school district is refusing to even acknowledge that there is a problem or that the child should receive any services or an IEP at all. Later down the road, it can be things like services. The school district is saying maybe your child only needs 30 minutes a week of specialized academic instruction. And a parent is saying, well, we were told based on this disability that our child should be receiving an hour a day of one-on-one specialized academic instruction. And then all the way to placement, which, I feel like placement is probably the biggest issue in the sense of non-public school placements are very expensive. So if a parent feels that the child can't be served within the school district, and there's a disagreement there where the school is saying, oh, we can do this, absolutely. That is oftentimes where attorneys get brought in. We get brought in at all times of the process, but it's usually where there is a disagreement that cannot be negotiated at an IEP level, or just a straight impasse between what the district thinks the student needs and what the parent thinks the student needs.
Now, have you found that bringing in an attorney, does that really help to move things along, or does the school district tend to like dig in their heels? What's your experience?
It depends on the district. I think, I mentioned that I think before we were recording that I actually serve as a mediator for Oakland Unified School District. I developed their ADR program, which is Alternative Dispute Resolution. And I just do mediations for them, meaning I don't represent them. I don't represent parents against the district anymore. I mediate special ed cases for them. And I'll tell you, a lot of times the district says to me in these mediations, oh, I wish this parent had an attorney, right? Because parents don't necessarily know what the law is or what they're actually entitled to or or what is actually possible under the law. So, in situations like that, if there's situations, a lot of attorneys in this field, I always say it's kind of relationship-based lawyering, right? We know all the parties, we're in the schools all the time. So an attorney can be helpful. I am one of those attorneys that doesn't come in and make enemies in IEP meetings. I have a very strong belief that, especially with younger kids, these are people that are going to be serving the child. We don't want to ruin relationships early on. Sometimes in some districts, some firms that represent school districts, when an attorney gets involved, they do dig in their heels. I always say a lot of times it has nothing to do with the kid or the family or the attorney. It has to do with stuff that has nothing to do with the kid, like a budget, right? Or they're at the end of a budget period, or they've, run out of money, or the timing, or the board has made new decisions. So it depends on the district. That said, attorneys are usually helpful in the process.
Yeah, I love that phrase that you used, relationship-based lawyering, or something like that. Like, because I
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
agree, right? I'm
yeah.
I'm a lover, not a fighter, and if we can, kind of make things move a little bit smoother and help get to the point without, a lot of bashing heads, then isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So that seems like one thing that I believe parents should look for in a special ed lawyer. What do you think are some other things? If parents are at their wits' ends, or the district maybe said to them, "Hey, you should really," well, I doubt the district would say that, but maybe some of their friends, or
Yeah, yeah.
what should they be looking for?
These are really personal cases, and I say this in the sense of I call it relationship-based lawyering, not just because I have relationship with the districts and opposing counsel in these cases, but I build strong relationships with my clients too. These are really personal issues. It's scary issues. It's very emotional issues. Parents fighting for their kids. There's nothing that can get in the way of a lot of parents and those emotions. So it's important that that initial relationship is established, like the parents trust you, or that, if you're going to hire an attorney as a parent, that you really trust this attorney, because there's a lot of negotiation involved. There's a lot of misunderstanding involved in special education law and what people are entitled to. If a client doesn't trust me and what I'm telling them, I always say it's probably best if we feels like we're not a good match here, right? You really have to trust who is representing you. You also need to decide whether or not you want someone like me, who's a relationship-based attorney, or somebody who's going to go in and pedal to the gas, just litigation. And I don't think there's a ton of those. There are some firms like that I know, in the Bay Area. And when I'm with a parent that says, I don't want to talk, I don't want to deal, I don't even want to think about settlement. Some parents need their day in court, without any negotiation talks. And so that depends too. You need to pick the attorney that's going to take the route that you want to take.
So, well, that's really helpful. So it sounds like from what you're describing, having somebody who's local really helps because I know like for my practice, we serve a lot of the Bay Area, but we serve all
Yeah.
over California. So is your approach you more or like most special ed lawyers kind of focus more on their community? Is that what you find?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question because obviously COVID changed everything,
Yeah.
right? It's like I used to only practice in the Bay Area. And even more so, I used to only practice like in the East Bay or just San Francisco because I don't want to charge somebody money to drive to an IEP meeting where I'm going to sit in traffic for 3 hours, right? It's different now because we have Zoom. So, I attend all those meetings via Zoom. Even our hearings in special education now are on a digital platform. That said, it is important that you know who you're dealing with, right? And at least in the Bay Area, there's a handful of firms that represent all of the school districts. So most of us that practice this law, we know each other. We know who we're up against. With certain school districts, I know that I'm not going to bring a kind of mediocre case because these attorneys are rough and they litigate constantly. In other districts, I know that I can make a phone call and get the problem fixed. So it is really important that you're dealing with an attorney who knows what's on the other side.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. This was so helpful. We're going to have your contact information below so people can reach out to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, especially to the parents who are facing these types of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like to share that you're not alone. Oftentimes when parents talk to me for a first time, they feel so validated. They come to me feeling so frustrated and, like I said, gaslit and confused. And, it's like I said at the beginning of the process, there's even, so many acronyms that it's like a different language. So people can feel really isolated and really alone. And, sometimes talking to an attorney or advocate can just get you over a little hump. You don't necessarily have to have a disagreement if you don't know the process. There's a lot of specialists that you can talk to help you understand it better.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been fascinating. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much for having me.
If this video is helpful for you, share it to someone else who might benefit from it.